Okay, welcome back to the virtual residency workshop 2022. It's Thursday, June 30th. This is our mid-afternoon session, and this is a panel working effectively with system-facing professionals. And in a moment, I'm going to turn the show over to our moderator, Dave Aiken. And by the way, for those of you on the panel, I prepended AA in front of your name in the list of participants, just so it's easy for people to find the panel participants. So Dave, take it away.
And you have to unmute yourself.
That helps, doesn't it? All right, so we can start out with a few questions that we kind of came up with over email the last few weeks. So question number one we can start out with is, what are the top 3 issues that research computing facilitators should keep in mind when working with system-facing professionals, both what to do and what not to do? So which one of our panelists wants to start out with the answer? And we'll all get a crack at this today. I'll call on Kyle Hudson.
All right. The biggest thing is the volume of email that we get on a daily basis. That we have to rely on some sort of filtering, that type of thing. I literally get thousands of emails a day. I mean, most of those get auto filtered to different places based on priorities and that kind of thing. But still, we deal with large volumes of email. So send things through the official channels. That's probably the biggest thing you need to know, is that if you don't go through the official channels, if you just email me directly, that's your stuff's probably going to get lost in the shuffle because it didn't go through our ticketing system and there's no back checks on it. It gets down the queue, down the list, and it gets forgotten about. So go through the official channels because of the volume of stuff we have to deal with. And that's, I didn't really think specifically of 3, but beyond that, probably the variety of things that we are dealing with. We're dealing with systems stuff and trying to improve and several projects all at once. So there are times if something's urgent, we can jump in and do that, but we can't always do that. There are times that we have other priorities that it seems like a fairly simple thing, but if it requires some time, that we may not be able to jump on immediately and just fix your problem. Even if we want to, we may not be able to.
Do you find reminders help whenever they, like a facilitator reminds you?
Yeah, and I don't mind at all if somebody says, "Hey, what's the status on this?" That kind of thing,
Yeah.
That doesn't bother me at all. But but being demanding will get you put to the bottom of the list. On the other hand,
it's kind of opposite with our group. At least we've got 2 research facing personnel, and it kind of ends up being where they have to do a lot of the work as far as the researcher facing. And so Henry will send us an email saying, "I'm going to create a new ticket to remind you, and here's what I need an answer for." So it's pretty good to have a reminder, at least for us. But yeah, I get what you're saying. And
I'd say people in the chat are saying introductions. I'm Kyle Hudson. I am one of the HPC system administrators at Kansas State University. We have a small team here. We only have 3 full-time employees, and then our boss, who's half-time HPC and half-time CS department faculty. So we're dealing with a very small group of people. It's probably smaller than most, and still dealing with a whole bunch of things there. So that's where I'm coming from.
Okay.
Kyle, how big is your environment? Just to get a sense of the scope with the staff you have.
We have about a little over 10,000 cores, around 350 nodes. In our main compute infrastructure, we're working on some other things with regional things and with high security, those types of things. But our main compute cluster is is say just a little over 10,000 cores.
And do you have a mix of nodes, GPU, high memory, FPGAs, or
We have
what
an
is this?
extremely heterogeneous environment. We have machines that are in service that are 8 or 9 years old at this point. They still work. We put in minimal effort to keep them, if they break and life goes on. We have, a mix of GPU, high memory, standard stuff, AMD, Intel, all across the board. We have a bunch of different stuff. The one thing that's kind of strange, what we do is we have consumer level GPUs rather than the data center level GPUs all on our system. We don't, as far as our main compute cluster goes, we do not have any commercial level GPUs.
Hey.
I can go ahead and introduce myself next. My name is Amir. I'm a manager of a research computing infrastructure team at Northwestern University. I've been with the university since 2004 in various positions, but since 2009, I've been a system admin, senior system admin team lead, and now manager of the research compute cluster infrastructure team. Our environment is about 900 compute nodes, various generations, 50 plus GPU nodes, tens of high memory nodes, 8 petabytes of storage, GPFS, InfiniBand, Fabric. Our team is 5 full-time system admins and me as a manager, and then a research-facing team is a little bigger, but there's data scientists and faculty-facing people, so that's who we are.
Okay. Does anyone else on the panel want to take a stab at answering the question about the top 3 issues that research computing facilitators should keep in mind when working with system-facing professionals?
Yeah, I can jump into that. And so there's a number of, I think, issues that come to mind. But one is researchers and then faculty-facing staff ask for infrastructure, right? They will come and ask us to buy more nodes, buy more storage. And I think what's sometimes hard to translate is that there's logistical issues in terms of power and cooling in the data center, in terms of how fast we can get that equipment on the floor, how fast we can deploy it, things that we need to put in place before things go into production. There's also issues with the just images, and none of this is kind of trivial, deploying hundreds of nodes at a time and picking the right image, picking the right libraries, picking the right InfiniBand backend, things of that, integrating into the existing cluster. It's not all trivial. And so I think what we need to do, at least what we have been trying to do better on our end, is communicating upfront and collaborating with the folks on the other side to kind of set the right deadlines and expectations of how soon we can get things in. Also, another thing that I think is maybe not an issue, but what I've seen across the landscape, in 2009, when we built our cluster, it was a lot of institutions were building general purpose clusters sort of for everybody, right? It wasn't tuned for any particular workloads. It wasn't optimized in any way. And then what I've seen, at least in the last couple of years, some of the optimization and some of the more custom solutions have been developed. I'm speaking mainly, like, we are now building a smaller cluster for our Primary School of Medicine. There will be MRI, imaging, and AI, and it will be HIPAA regulated. And none of us have really experience with HIPAA regulation and what it takes to be compliant. And so I would be interested from other panels to see, have they seen that shift from kind of general purpose big clusters that are meant to be for everybody, and then moving into more specialized, smaller solutions.
So your cluster is a mixed environment of regulated and non-regulated, is that what you're saying?
No, right now it's non-regulated, but we've been asked to build a separate, smaller cluster that will be regulated. And so we are in the process of developing that. And most of the work is really on the sort of policy and documentation side. Building a 20-node small cluster is easy. relatively easy. But building that whole support structure from compliance office and security, that's taking a lot of time.
Okay. There was someone who asked here, how do your sysadmins notify people who submit tickets about the status or resolution of the ticket? So do you guys use a ticketing system to communicate with between the researchers and users and the facilitators and yourself? Is that something you guys do?
I can take that questions. I think it's probably, did I interrupt anybody?
No, go for it.
Yeah, the reason because it's interesting.
Can you hold on just a second? Can you introduce yourself? I think.
Yeah, I was about to.
Yeah.
This is Janelle Pervez. A lot of people know me as JP. I'm at the University of Texas at Dallas. So we do have research facing and system facing, but actually there is not decided or in a hard line that you work as a system facing and you work as research facing. So all of them are on the same email list.
Yeah.
So we do use ticketing systems, and it's very difficult to educate the researchers to use the ticketing system. Everybody has a fan club, and I have some PIs that love me before they talk to anybody. They just email me first, and I make them to open the ticket while already half of the work is being done. So we try to tell them same thing, that use the ticketing system. That's why if I'm on vacation or if I cannot, someone else can serve your request. And also there is a history. So if another graduate students or someone else in your group wants us to install the same thing, and we can figure out what has been done in the past. So it's basically a cultural shift for us at the university to have them into ticketing system, because you have central IT, they use a help desk ticketing systems, and there's another group, there's another ticketing system. So sometimes it's not their fault. They just go and call the help desk and they assign the ticket through us to the enterprise ticketing system, but we use our own ticketing system.
Okay. Is the growing pains partly because you've grown a lot over the past few years?
Yes, and the ticketing system that we are using is RT, is an open source, doesn't have all the bells and whistles. We have Atlas, and previous university we had what's the name, the most famous ticketing systems? I forgot the name of it. So sometimes ticket goes to two, three different places, and we use Jira. And for internal, if I want to request something to the network people, and some people like that, so we spread it all over. But we try to put our users on the same ticketing system. And one thing we did, they used to know our group email address. We took it out. We created a new list, and we don't give it to them, because if they find out they sending reply after reply into the same email, and then another admin may not be involved on that one, and they got blocked by all those chain email.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we try to put them into a ticketing system.
You guys have,
Similarly, our ticketing system is all based through email. We use Request Tracker, which is open source software for ours. The university has just started a new Team Dynamics, real help desk system. We are talking about maybe moving over there sometime in the next, vague year or two kind of feature. But for right now, we're going to stick with what we have, which say is completely email based. We have a web back into it, but the users don't actually log into a ticketing system, do that. They do it by sending an email to our address, not to one of us individually, but to the group address.
Exactly, that's the way the RT work. By the way, my university is in now at R1. So if someone asks us questions, we are growing really fast. Started with 2 people. Now we have 4 PhDs in our group. So they all sometimes, we kind of swap with each other. They are learning the system administration side of it. If they take a request from the users and they are research facilitators, sometimes they come and ask us for the hardware support that to provide them. They also take the request to other national level support, for example, TAC, Jetstream. So they do that part of the request.
That's
think-
interesting, JP, that your research-facing staff is kind of overlapping or learning system administration. What we found on our end is that as we progressed over the last 10 years, we have seen that overlap kind of disappear. Faculty-facing folks really want to focus on putting up workshops, teaching and learning, documentation, and are less interested in the system administration side of things. And I think that makes sense, right? They're busy with what they have to do, which leaves system admins really just kind of focus on the infrastructure side of things. So it's interesting that you still have that overlap of folks on the other side wanting to learn system administration. Or
That's interesting. So how many do most of your group, Demir, does that most of your group have a dual role of both research facilitator and systems facing, or no?
No, so no, we are split, and we are split in, I don't know if this is normal or common thing across the institutions, but the infrastructure team is in the data center space. And the research services team is under the services and support. So kind of two different umbrellas, two different VPs. So complete separation. And in the past, we, even though we were still sitting in a different organizations, we would kind of overlap. And specifically, when I say this, like picking a CPU for a refresh. So our facility, what we do is, I understand that a lot of institutions do rip and replace. They'll buy a cluster for a few years, use it, and then take it out and put a new one in. What we do is we refresh it every year. So we take the oldest hardware out and deploy the kind of next generation to the existing cluster. And so the issue for us was always picking a CPU as system-facing people. We didn't really know like what kind of code are you running, what do you want us to optimize on. So we would lean on the researcher-facing folks to kind of tell us, hey, get us more cores or more memory, or get us a higher frequency CPU. And in the last couple of years, we have been enabled and encouraged to actually, consult with some of the faculty members and, make these decisions on our own. So even though I said, there's a less overlap, there's still some overlap, but it's really like system administration should really sit with this team, and then workshops, learning, teaching really should sit with the faculty facing side.
Yeah. Okay.
So just want to jump in here real quick and introduce myself. Andy Keene, Michigan State. We're in R1. We have 10,000 nodes, 50,000 cores. We have a team, and I lead a team of 8 people. And for us, the number one issue, top three issues would be that our research facilitators should keep in mind is that trying to operate with a framework of mutual respect. That we have that research facilitators are and sysadmins both have or systems facing teams both have different areas of expertise, but they're both incredibly valuable. And understanding that that I may not know astrophysics or biology, but I can being able to understand how that code or those environment works and how to work with the researcher facilitators to make that happen is really when it's understanding that we're both we're partners and we are trying to solve these problems, and so not coming at from a insulting or or credentialism framework that understanding that these are we may have different needs or understandings, but it's really important that we we both value each other, and that another challenge is that the systems team often faces is working in environments of limited resources and so understanding what the users and the research facing teams needs and priorities are is critical, and being able to communicate that both internally and externally is a real challenge. It's really important.
Do you guys do any team building exercises between the facilitators and systems facing?
We sometimes do.
Yeah.
We've in the past we've done offsites and we've done and pre-COVID obviously,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
we've done.
it does hurt. Yeah. Go ahead. Keep going. Sorry.
Yeah, I think one thing that was worked well for us is doing having the facilitator, research facilitator, and the systems person work together on a problem and trying to understand what, having the systems facing person understand being able to see the research side work and understand the constraints and what the systems person is aware of, working with a researcher has been valuable for us.
Okay. Let's go on to another question here. How would you summarize a system-facing professional's key responsibilities, and likewise a research computing facilitator's responsibilities? Let's start with that. Maybe one more on here. What's the division between what a research computing facilitator is responsible for versus what a sysadmin is responsible for? So, in my opinion, I'm David Aiken here at the University of Oklahoma. I work directly under Henry Neiman. I'm the team lead here at OU. And probably there's so much blur anymore because of the lack of staff that we have, that everyone has to wear, multiple hats. I'd say it depends on, what time of day it is, would be the division between what a systems facing and researcher facing task are, or what the responsibility is. There's overlap because everyone has to pitch in and make sure that, number one, that the cluster is online, everyone's job is running, the nodes are healthy, things like that. But maybe at other institutions where there's a lot more staff. I know that Kyle said that you guys are a pretty small group right now. How about you, Andrew? How many staff do you guys have, or systems facing versus researchers?
We have I'm going to get the numbers wrong, but we have ballpark 8 systems facing people and 8 research facing. For us, the dividing line is root versus non-root. That's it's not, there's obviously some flex there, but and there are also some regulatory issues that come into that too. But I think working with security, I think the other big thing is systems faces more on the security side versus understanding the security and regulatory requirements tends to be more on the system side for us at least.
Okay, are those systems facing dedicated to HPC, or are they have other things they do as well?
The HPC environment, which we are, we maintain some large file systems and some additional supporting infrastructure for that. But yeah.
Okay.
So at my university, UT Dallas, one thing is kind of clear between research facing and system facing, even though, we, like many other university, we share the responsibility. So one thing we don't do at the at the university is that research facing people didn't see the face of the data center. Any kind of hardware installations is an hour from my university, and we are the one who do it. And so people who are system facing, they know the research side of the stuff too. So sometimes they do overlap, but not vice versa. Another thing that we keep in within the system facing people is the file system. Like Andrew was saying about the security and file system. This is the thing, we don't let them touch it. But research facing people, my PI, Henry knows him very well, Chris Simon, he's an architect. So anytime he can take over the data center and he can do things. So other people, if they needed to reboot a node, they have the credential, they can do it. But head nodes and then the file systems and the networking gears is always maintained by the system facing people.
Do you
Well,
guys
that's
find
pretty-
it where someone has elevated rights, it makes it easier for the research computing facilitator to do their job if they have a little bit more elevated rights than just a normal user?
Yes, we do giving them root permission to install software. So because they deals with the users,
Yeah.
and if they need to do any R packages that require an OS level, the packages, so they have access to it, and they'll go ahead and install it. And sometimes they figured out, well, the same job was running 1 month ago. There was no issue. All of a sudden, then they submitted the job on the same node. Why is not working? And that's the time they contacted us, and system facing people find out what's wrong with it, who physically look at it. Maybe file system GPFF was unmounted, and now their scratch file system is not there, or memory has been deleted. So a smaller system, if we are not there, we'll let them go ahead and reboot the node. It's a stateless, so it comes right away. But the crucial ones, we do not allow them to do it, where we are, like, as I mentioned, we have file systems and other license software, which involve firewall. We don't let them touch it.
Yeah.
We don't do that, or we basically have two people that I would say are system facing, one researcher facing, and there's a little bit of overlap. Like I said, I'm probably 75% system facing and about 25% or 25%, researcher facing. We have one person though whose real job really is researcher facing, and he does not have root access on our system. And the reason for that is because we see him as being able to, show people that here's how I did this. Specifically, not being, they say I need to install root, I need to install this. No, you don't. Here's how I did this.
Yeah.
And working through it that way. Now, that being said, if he says we need to install software, I trust him. I'm going to believe him. I'm going to install the software. I'm not going to, question that.
Yeah.
I think there's real value in having the research facilitator having an experience as close to the user as possible. And so if the research facilitator has pain points, then that's something that users are going to be having too. And so it's a good way to empower the users. Even to solve some of these problems.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what we've found is that our facilitators, they can have elevated access, because if they're in a help session and they can update, or they can do a number of things to help, they can help the user along quickly instead of having to open up a ticket and someone has to look at it and, et cetera, et cetera. So that's really good.
They need to log in as a user X and Y to make sure user is telling the correct story. So if they don't have the root access, they cannot issue to user X or Y or Z.
That's a really good point. It is hard to know what the actual issue is if you don't have elevated privileges.
Yeah,
I will say,
like,
even though our researcher facing guy does not have root privileges, he does have file system privileges to get into people's home directories, to look at logs, to look at software, to look at scripts, that type of thing. So we did add that piece in there.
Yeah.
I think it's also depend on who the research facilitator is. So what they started. In our case, we had two of them, and they're pretty good. They have a PhD, and so they have pretty much good responsibility, and we know them while they're working as a graduate students. And so it's kind of trust and skill set that you see. At the same time, yes, I do believe not everyone's just started research facilitator need to have that kind of the privileges, because it could be sometimes dangerous.
We have a very strong institutional data policy that prevents us from looking at the user's data, and so it would save us some time. But having a bright line about not looking at their data unless they are explicitly authorizing that is really important for us.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go one more here. Let's see. So what are the biggest pain points that system-facing professionals encounter day to day? So the biggest pain points is, what is your pain, Kyle Hudson, day by day?
Storage is probably my biggest one. And just the management of it, hard drives die, aging hardware in storage. And that, and trying to juggle the multiple priorities that I'm dealing with. I feel like I'm constantly being pulled many different ways.
So how long have you been doing Ceph there at your institution?
I believe it's been, well, I know we were using it in 2016 when we moved to this building. So at least 8 years.
Well,
been using it for quite a long time.
okay. And how large is your storage? How many petabytes?
About three and a half raw.
Okay. And roughly how many drives is that?
568, if I remember correctly.
Okay. No, that's at least a full-time person to take care of drive replacements and all that.
It cycles. I mean, there are times that you're really busy dealing with storage stuff, and actually the worst part isn't dead drives. Dead drives are fine. That's a self-healing process. Slow drives are the issue, because it's like, oh, I'm going to try again.
Okay.
Oh, I got it. Let me try again. Let me get the next byte in there. And that is the worst problem is failing but not failed drives.
Okay. I'll put the same question to Mr. Pervez. JP, what's your biggest pain points day by day?
I think, of course, what Carl said, that is across the university standard. I want to bring up then interesting issues. So sometimes research facilitators, they become victims of the PI or grad students or the users. They'll come and say, okay, could you install this software for us? They have seen this in a paper or found it somewhere else. They want to reproduce it. And it was done on probably the latest version of Ubuntu. All the packages and the GCCs and all the compilers are the latest. Now our cluster is on CentOS. So they took the ticket and put it in there. Now they ask us to install it, and research facilitator took the responsibility and it will be done, but they didn't have no idea that our hardware is not capable of changing it. Just yesterday, I found that somebody said one of their packages need SSL 3.0. Even I think CentOS 8 doesn't have it. So it spent half a day to configure their software. So another thing, we have workstation that over $20,000. PI they buy it is the multiple GPUs and CPUs and very high memory, 500 gigs of memory, and they feel like they have paid for it, it's their grant, and they usually put that baby in their desk. It's not in the data center. Sometimes those workstations cost more than the server. Now they want to have root access. I had many struggle with them to make them understand that you cannot have a root access. They want, and then they bargain with the sudo access. A couple of times I gave them sudo access and configured it wrong. They ended up getting into etc password. So yeah, they keep pushing for it, and they always go for the nicest one, and I'm on the nicest one. And among them, there are other people say either you maintain it or we maintain it, and because they are sysadmin, they're tough. Since I'm in research computing, I know how to deal with the PIs, and at the end of the day, we had to make them happy. It went that far that we had to go to the dean. Dean said nobody should be asking system admin for the root access. You are here to do research. You are not here to do system administration. And it was a big pain. Even my best fan club member got upset because they used to love me a lot. Whatever they asked, I gave them. But when I didn't give them root, and they got upset. So I don't know.
What's the point of having a cluster if it's not all, that's what it's designed for, to work in concert with each other and not,
it's a workstation. Even they told me this story. This is my lab. You cannot even come in. You don't have access to a special lab, and there's an environmental issue. They tried to tell me that. So when I told my director contacted the dean, and the dean talked to the PI, and issue was solved. So PI didn't contact anymore. But they played that game that, special entry that I need, and only certain people can go there. And there are times in the middle of the experiment, he needs something, he has to have access. He said, I don't want to call you in the middle of the night or middle of the day. You're a very busy person. It makes your life easier. Give me that access.
Yeah. Do you find that you can push containers or some sort of technology like Kubernetes or Podman to say, well, go ahead.
Yeah, those are in the cluster, but on the workstations, they want more access.
Even more, right?
Yeah, and also even, they have 20, 30, 40 terabytes of file system in there. We have multiple disks. So I have the admin access, and I created a directory for them, PI, and gave him access. But he told me, no, don't worry about it. This is my file system, my workstation. Just give me the whole access to the drive. I said, no, I need to manage the system side of it. So you can read and write, you can delegate your authority to your students, but I need to have access to. They don't realize it. They feel offended that, they work so hard and they brought that money to the university. Now they feel like they're begging to us for their own property.
Yeah.
I can see their pain, but this is a problem dealing with the researchers.
We try to push containerized things to people who need elevated privileges or things where they can have more control. But at the end of the day, you absolutely can't give the PI more rope than they can handle, because they'll end up hanging themselves in the process. And then they're mad at you because you don't have a cluster that is actually working well. Yeah, that's not a win for anybody. All right, Demir, same question to you. Biggest pain points?
I think for us, the biggest pain point is similar to Kyle, storage, and then the InfiniBand. It's the technologies that when they work really well, and you don't have to really do much. But when they go down, the whole cluster is impacted. And then it's like, okay, now we need to remember, like, what are the InfiniBand troubleshooting steps? How do we figure out, which cables connected to which spine, to which leaf, to which node, and kind of going through that process? That becomes a little challenging. And I think related to that is really just kind of building the redundancy on the team and building the documentation. So our team is small, and we don't have any redundancies around. Our storage guy is our storage guy. Our InfiniBand guy happens to be the same person, right?
Yeah.
Our Slurm person is Slurm person. And so anytime anybody takes vacation, if he happens to have some kind of incident, it's really hard. It's reinventing the wheel and trying to figure out exactly, do we have documentation on this? How do we? So for us, that's a pain point, really building the right redundancies. And I think what we are trying to do today is illustrate to the leadership that here's the resource plan we have, here's operational tasks the team has day to day, here's the project work you're asking us to do. And if you put those two together, really, we are sort of out of time. We are already in debt. And how do we negotiate for more jobs? How do we negotiate for other positions? One step we took on our side is we finally got students to work for us, work study students, and I think that's helping. And I think Andrew brought this up as well. The users will know, how the users will know where system is not working, right? And similarly for us, students come in and can kind of illustrate some of the things, because one of the students we hired is active user of our cluster, and he's already started making suggestions on like, hey, I have this pain point as a student trying to operate on this cluster. Could we improve this? So I think for us, I kind of gave you a lot there, but I think the redundancy of the team is a problem. Storage and InfiniBand are kind of these magic boxes that when they work really well, but when they break, everything goes down. And then just the staffing altogether is a problem always.
Does the facilitators do most of the user handling in that case, where you have, a fire to put out? Do they handle the user side, or is that up to you as far as notifying them that we have an issue?
That's a really good question. It's all on the facilitator side. So what we usually do is I'll communicate, for example, with the manager of that team, and then they will actually send listserv messages out. They will post status pages out. We also have a really good service operations center that's open 24/7, and they facilitate opening calls for us, technical bridges, things of that nature. And service operations center, just to go back on the storage side, does help us with like a hard drive replacing and replacing InfiniBand cables. So kind of we work through these layers of service operations center, kind of infra team, and then facilitators on top, and we have a pretty decent collaboration across all three layers.
Yeah. So how many student workers do you guys have right now? I mean, is it quite a few, and do they usually migrate into the role of facilitator, or?
So currently we have 2 students. We will expand it to 5. I was at the PERC 2000, I think just before COVID, I think it was 2019 or 2018. And there was this panel of Stanford, Iowa, I think it was University of Chicago, and maybe one other institution. And they were sort of lamenting this fact that HPC professionals are really hard to retain, right? Financial industry kind of keeps poaching anybody that has any HPC experience, right? And so and Purdue was one of the panelists. And they were basically saying, like, we can't really retain these people. Once they get a little bit of experience, once their HPC page has GPFS, HPC, any of these technologies, they're getting bombarded with recruitment from trading firms, high frequency trading, things of that nature. And so these institutions on the panel, they have a very mature student kind of pipeline where they convert their students into system admins, essentially, not even facilitators. And then, eventually knowing that they will leave the institution and go do something, bigger and better. And so I was in that room listening to those panelists, and I figured, like, this makes a lot of sense. And so we introduced that program at Northwestern just recently.
Yeah. And
Purdue does a very good job with their student training, and I think for us, it's the recognition that the life cycle of an HPC admin is short, but and that it's easy that when we cannot compete with Amazon or big corporate for what we can pay, but as part of our role as a university is to do talent development, and part of that is systems HPC people.
Okay. Let's see here. Go ahead. Yeah, if you got another point.
Sorry, I just wanted to,
yeah, go for it.
Sorry, I just wanted to for us, our pain point right now, our biggest pain point is supply chain. Trying to get things delivered within 9 months or a year. Thanks, Mellanox. And so other than that, working through the security and regulatory compliance is a big headache.
Yeah, you're not alone.
Yeah, is it 9 months? Is that what you're saying? Okay.
9 months from Mellanox cables right now.
Wow.
Same goes for GPUs and other stuff. And they are grant 4 years old, and I think 6 months is already gone. And we placed the order, haven't got it. So 3.5 years. By the time we install it and all those, another 2-3 months will be gone. Yeah, that is the pain. I wanted to answer one of the questions. Someone says you can install the software on user space. So we ran into an issue. So we have home directory and a Scratch. Scratch is GPFS. So home directory, you have 20 gigs. So the research facing people are telling the users that you need to learn how to install the software. You got your grad student, you can do on your own. And everybody started installing all the R packages, Python packages, and pretty soon they call, well, we cannot log in it to the system anymore because they ran out of 20 gig quota. And I think they did on GPFS, especially SPAC, if every user start to install a SPAC, is going to start from the scratch when you install a software. It's going to install all the dependencies underneath, and you get thousands of files. And then I got penalized from the GPFS side from metadata. I ran out of metadata disk, and we had to upgrade it. It became slower, so I told them, no, give it to me. We built for one, and anybody can load it and use it. So but some admin, they throw them into say, you go and install on your own, but I try to keep it centralized, because no matter what, resources are limited.
Yeah. For us, as far as users installing things, we try to have them install it because just the sheer number of Python packages that people want, and our packages it's overwhelming. We can't keep up with it, and so we'd rather give them, a bump in quota than have to spend the time with, yet another package to install. And on our next cluster we're putting together right now, we're looking at doing some compression to help with that. And I'll talk to Kyle afterwards to see if there's some deduplication within Ceph. In that way, even if 10 people install the same package, it would still only take the same amount of space. We have enough time for one more question here. And how can research computing facilitators help system facing serve their researchers more effectively and vice versa? So we'll start with Andrew on that. Or actually, Sai, we haven't called on you. So if you want to take that one, go ahead.
Yeah, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes, now.
Yeah, I seem to have some problems with the Zoom client on Ubuntu. So my name is Sai Meduri. I'm a system administrator at Vanderbilt University. Our team here is medium-sized. We have 21 FTEs, research systems facing, sorry. And we have one full-time research facilitator. I just wanted to give that intro pretty quickly. I see Timothy has pointed out that 21 is not medium. I know it's medium large, I would say. But yeah, sorry, can you repeat that question one more time?
Sure. How can research computing facilitators help system-facing professionals to serve the researchers more effectively and vice versa?
Yeah, so I think keeping a line of communication open is absolutely helpful. So making sure that the research facilitators are also part of the planning, they're aware of all the things that have maybe gone down and under repair. It's easy for them to communicate to the users in case users are trying to access them it's very useful to be integrated fully. And also it's very helpful that research facilitators gain some Linux experience, because that has been valuable in the past for us. Like our research facilitator, who's actually in the audience, by the way, so I'm not gonna say anything bad. But yeah, so the Linux skills that our research facilitator learned was very helpful, and oftentimes he's able to fully address user requests without us even having to do anything. So yeah, those are 2 points.
Okay. I'd have to agree with everyone. 21 people, that is not medium. That's very not. I wish we had that at our site. We can dream. Okay, so let me ask this. Can we open up to the floor, or do you guys on the panel want to answer and add on to what Syed had talked about?
I will, mention that thinking about it as like the 5 W's, who, what, when, where, why, and how is really helpful for framing and being able to communicate with the research, direct to the researchers and to the systems people to kind of understand what the system side people are thinking, but also what the research needs are and what the timelines are on that, and the impact of it, and helping be advocates for the user. Like a research facilitator, I think the best role for them is as an advocate for the user, and to be able to communicate both and for the systems team to be able to communicate in both directions to really kind of bridge these communication difficulties.
How far forward do you guys know what the researchers' needs are? I mean, we might know what what grants that they've applied for, but usually it's more of like, here's our public resource, or we can help them try to get their work with what we have. And so, like, how do you forecast, what people are going to need? Or are you guys that, savvy yet?
So on our end, what we've been trying to do is we use XDMod to kind of really mine the data, scheduler data as much as we can. And so in the last few months, we started this capacity metrics kind of project where we try to tease out, like, what does it look like from terms of job perspective? What are our jobs looking like? How long do they run on average? How long do you wait? How long does a general queue or short queue wait before the job launches versus normal queue or long queue, right? And so it doesn't really inform like what you're asking. Like, it doesn't really, we didn't get to the point where it can inform what kind of hardware we need to buy or how much hardware we need to buy. But I think we are getting to a place where this data can kind of help inform some of those decisions. So if, for example, general access, which is our free tier, is waiting too long in a queue, right? And our buying tier, which is, tier where you buy and you have semi-exclusive access to your node, if there's, discrepancy there in wait times in types of jobs that are being launched, it could sort of beg a question, or it could lead us down the path of let's invest more in the general access versus, put all this subsidies in place that encourage people to buy nodes. So that's one way we are trying to kind of get at that point. I mean, we get, our facilitators work closely with faculty and let us know, hey, chemistry is getting a grant, $500,000 for GPUs, let's get quotes and things of that nature. But we kind of want to be more proactive than that. Like, when they do come with these grants, we can maybe use this data from XDMod to kind of inform us, like, instead of buying these type of nodes, maybe we should be buying something else. So it's a small effort that just started, like I said, a few months ago. I don't know that we have used the data effectively yet. It's still a lot of mining and a lot of understanding what the metrics look like, but that's one path we're trying to do here.
Is that some of the text that you can provide? Like, here's the data of how long it took you to wait for your job to run, like the average time, and they can put that into the proposal and saying this will help. Yeah.
Yeah, something like that. And one thing that we used just recently is we kind of hit our cap in a data center power-wise, and we had shut some of the nodes down. That's being remedied, and it's going to get fixed in a couple of months. But we use this data to essentially show how much of a wait times kind of went up when we shut these nodes down, right? So we have charts and graphs, and one of the persons that put all that together is on the call today as well. But we put these graphs together to display to facilitators that, hey, this has a real impact. Not investing in a data center facilities for a couple of years has a real impact on actual research. Jobs are waiting longer to launch now. So that's been at least helpful from going in front of the research steering committee and VP of research to kind of show that we need money for facilities, for things of that nature.
How far back do you keep your XDMod data? Like, is it 6 months or a year, or is it
right now? It's multiple years right now. I don't know exactly how far back we can roll, but it's multiple years.
Okay. Okay. JP, do you have anything to add on that part?
So at my university, we started with 2 people. At the beginning, I was going door to door soliciting people. Hey, we have HPC, and I had only 20 nodes. So it's just like a drug business. And then we give them a little bit of taste, and they liked it. And then they said, yeah, we probably can trust you. This is the central IT, they have HPC. So people start to moving in. And once they came to know, then we hired people, the director level people with the PhDs, and they became PI support. Now they're lining up to talk to the PI because he understands the science and he has done in the past. So they even co-writing the grant with them. So they build a pipeline and we help them figuring out what their hardware need. In the past, they have bought system by the graduate students or their postdoc or even the Office of Research, and vendor gave them the sweet deal, not telling them that actually this is not the workload they need, or this resource is not the right for their workload. And we ended up throwing those junk. So
no.
before they buy anything, even though they said their money, we stop them. We ask them to talk to us, and we go through multiple vendor, and we figure out if it is the right solution for them.
Do you guys ever swap out nodes where they bought the wrong thing, so that maybe you get the nodes more of like in a public role, and maybe people who need that sort of machine that they can use the one that they bought and then help them get something they need?
Always.
Yeah.
We are scavenging things, and people bought with I think to do some MATLAB work with the Dell came up, you remember, on the Stampede one that used to run on that multi-core CPUs.
Oh, the mic, yeah.
Yeah, Mike, and we're putting that as a show, as a museum. We took all of them out. It was a huge waste of money. Even we feel like the sysadmin probably had a kickback. It was a waste, and the company sold it to them. It doesn't do the science. We
Yeah.
took it out.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and someone talked about if you have a Nobel laureate on your researchers and they are pushing, this kind of systems, it is true. When I moved in and we have a PI came in, it's very powerful. And the thing is, there are some PIs, they were system admin in their previous life. So they know some of the things. And they came and said, I want to do this thing on Ubuntu, not Red Hat, because this is where my science work. And we told them that any kind of science you bring it is our responsibility. We'll build it. But they are pushing it. So we had to wipe out the Red Hat and put Ubuntu on it. And sometimes they will dictate what kind of file system do you want to do? Because at the end of the day, these people are super powerful and they have a lot of money. Okay. Until you have same level of people with a PhD who have experience and can talk to them and, and the gain trust. So sometimes I feel sorry for the research facilitator. They are in between. They just convey of the message, and they get kind of squeezed by both party. And so when the user tell them or do something wrong, system admin people usually are pure IT. They will send an Instagram. I'm going to block your etc password. I told you 3 times not to run this on the head node, or not to run this MPI program. It doesn't have an InfiniBand. It's just running on the Ethernet. You took my cluster down. You're done. And that goes to the dean. So usually then research facilitator come, and they usually have better soft skill than system-facing people.
Yeah. There are some course. So let me ask you this, and this is my own personal question. I'm sure there's others who've had this same discussion. So if you have a Ubuntu and a Red Hat mix on one cluster, is that what you're saying?
No, we have multiple clusters. Small, medium, large, yeah.
Okay.
And so our policy is, even though it's your money, it's a university system, and we are giving a free service. If your resources is not being utilized, we will give it to another people, even though they don't contribute it. Given that if the original users ask for it, the freeloader has to stop it right away.
Okay. All right. Kyle, you want to say something?
We run on a condo model too. We have some nodes that are centrally owned, but most of what we have is for it was bought by researchers, and they have kick off priority access, and that's how we provide free access to everybody else. So, and we've said the exact same things like with the drug dealer thing, first hits free. I've said that in a tour earlier this week. So that's what we do, is we give everybody free access, but you're basically scavenging cores. If you want to, and then say it's a Disney Fast Pass, if you want to pay up, you can jump to the front of the line.
Yeah. Okay.
And I put in the chat too, our biggest proponents are PIs that have had clusters in their own offices, in their own labs. And they realize that the expensive part of running a cluster is not buying the hardware. It's people like me that'll keep the software up to date and security up to date and knows how to keep things running.
Keeping it centralized has a lot of benefits, and I haven't seen anyone have their own departmental cluster that they can manage really well, and it's a lot of work. And if they push it over to us, I mean, that makes more sense. I'd like to get some questions from the research facilitators. If you guys have some, unmute yourself and ask.
I do have a list also of questions people have put in the chat, and I will stick around and answer them to the best of my ability after we're done here, but go ahead.
Yeah, Ashley, go ahead.
I have a quick question. Say you have a pretty good working relationship with a research facilitator. Does it bother you if they ask questions about, like, not just to help the facilitator, like not just to help the PI, but also for like their own learning and understanding? Is that like an annoying thing, or is that okay?
No, I love that.
Okay.
Because if they're asking those questions, that means they're not going to be asking the same thing over and over again.
Hopefully, right? If they write it down.
Right.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Yeah, the more that someone knows, the better off. For the facilitator, the more that they know, the better off that we all are as a group. So I love questions. Okay, anybody else? Okay. Henry, how long do we have left?
12 minutes.
12 minutes.
So
Okay.
I would recommend, if you're kind of coming to the end of existing material, Kyle said he had kept a record of the questions people had asked in the chat. Maybe hit a couple of those.
Sure. Go ahead, Kyle. You want to pick one or two?
Okay. The first one I see here is, do you offer any sort of onboarding or intro to your systems for your facilitators, so you can explain how you like to work and best practices? In our case, we do that at least once a year, if not usually twice. We try to do it one time in the start of the fall semester, and sometimes, depending on demand, we'll do one at the beginning of the winter semester also.
Yeah, we tend to.
Go ahead.
We tend to try not do a specific training course for our facilitators, because we want them to see the new user onboarding process, and then again pain points around, hey, this and give them the ability to fix the documentation as they discover that. We do basically pair programming, where we will sit down with either an experienced RC or a systems person for a block of time and try and walk through their questions. But that's worked better for us.
Actually, I just realized I said to our facilitators. That's to our end users. We only have one role facilitator, so that's he has more experience at this than I do.
So usually we let them know if you build a new cluster, new GPU cluster, or new resources came in, and we tell them, okay, this is the capability of these resources. So anytime new ticket comes in, and you forward that to these resources, so that we keep them updated.
Looks
Similar
like
question just came in too, was do we have office hours? And we also do that. We have 1 hour a week. We put it on our website, everywhere else. It used to be in person, and since COVID hit, we've done it all on Zoom, and we'll probably go at least hybrid for as long as I think ever, And that's a once a week, 1 hour thing.
Go ahead, Dylan. You have a question. You have your hand raised.
Yeah. So one thing I've experience is that we've often been informed by our users about like what they want. So they tell us about workflows and science that they want to do, but like then configuring a system and building it is a little bit more difficult. So I guess my question is, what would you like to hear from facilitators about building a new system or new nodes or whatever you want to put in to wherever?
Let's let Cy handle this one. I'm going to call on you specifically.
Cannot hear him.
Linux audio joke.
Hi, can you hear me?
There you go.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, can you repeat that question? Sorry.
Sure, yeah. So the question is like, in my experience, we hear from users about what they want to do, what sort of science they want to do, but then what does that mean as a sysadmin? Like, what system do we need to build for them to do their thing? So what do you want to hear from facilitators in order for you to build a system that would meet user requirements?
Yeah, so the basic components are what we usually look for, like where the data would live, what kind of data, where how is it staged, how is it going to be accessed on the cluster, and probably some of the tech stack. So it does help to understand what the end goal is and what the research goal is, but yeah, like really that's what we're trying to understand, what the compute requirements are and how the data is accessed and staged, mostly just the pipeline.
And the aspirations for the next 5 years, because if you're going to buy some machines to go into, a data center, you want to at least plan that, they'll be in production for 4 years, and which really means 5, since, it takes time to replenish them, especially like, a 1-year wait time right now on machines. So that's the kind of thing that I would ask.
I think, trying to figure out how mature the code is and how well understood it is as a domain. Like if you were to say, if someone from physics came to me and said, I have an astrophysics code, that means, okay, that, they really understand a lot about their code. So questions like, what is your memory bandwidth requirements? How well does it scale up per core? Are you frequency, is frequency, or having a higher frequency or more cores? How much RAM do you need? Do you have any special network requirements in terms of bandwidth? Is it an MPI code or an OpenMP code? Is it going to scale? Do I need to think about one node? Do I think about multiple nodes? How far out? How much money do you have is really the main question, right? That's I can build some incredible stuff if you have a DOE check, but realistically, or if it's not a mature code, if it's some horrible bioinformatics code. Apologies to all the bioinformaticians on the call. I love bioinformatics, but it is compared to some other codes, it is a less well-developed field. So in that case, they probably will want more memory per core, or they will not necessarily scale out as widely, and so understanding how optimized the code is, and then if they have a good understanding about what the code requirements are, but if they don't, if there is a proxy that can help you understand what the application would look like. So I may not know all the chemistry codes, but I know like chemistry code X, Y, and Z have these requirements, and so I can kind of guide them along that direction.
Someone put in the chat, do the systems people get involved at grant proposal writing stage to avoid pitfalls later? I'll let JP take that one.
I don't think we have ever worked with grant with the PI. Usually it happens after they get the grant when they ask for the resources.
Yeah.
Unless like we have the PI support who knows stuff, and if they sometimes co-write, but we try not to do that. No, I didn't have that experiences. Yeah. See, in our cases, what happens sometimes the professor was using TAC or PSSC lab. Now he has his own money. And he said, you know what, I was running my code on TAC or PSC, but now I have 5-6 graduate students and I want to do the same thing here. Can you build me a system exactly like TAC? So I want my code to run there. It was running smooth. And so that's when we talk to them and find out, like Andrew was asking, how much money they have, what kind of code they have. Did they try a smaller amount of running their code with a small amount of data, or large data, small code, all kind of things, because they always ask for the biggest one. And sometimes we did buy it for them, and we ended up that many of their servers are just sitting idle. And we also had professor told them, oh, if I don't use it, I'll lose it. And so use all my money. We love that. Buy it for the university. But so when we just started, we didn't have control over that. Now we do have control, even they're trying to buy stuff. We consult with them. I had a professor who bought high-end workstation because the software they bought, underneath the software footnote, and they said, this is the company sell the system. And they already bought the system, it was in Windows, and they called us later on when do through the enterprise IT, they opened a ticket. They said, this look like an HPC. Could you guys help this professor? He's talking about Linux, but we don't deal with it. And we went there, we found the story. He bought the system and it wasn't the optimized for it. The vendor sold it to him because his software recommended to buy a turnkey solution for them.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah, so this kind of discovery goes on all the time. And sometimes it's good for us because we came to know the PI, and later on we found, I mean, one day we went to one of the Windows user and they called us through enterprise ticketing system that they need to do some imaging, and he was working on their Windows 10 workstation. Now something broke, it's not working. So we went there and went with their director and talked to them, and he has done the same research in the past. And now today I went to the data center and I saw the $400,000 GPU stuff coming in, and we'll be installing them. So we did outreach him and we talked to him, and they have the money. So one thing is that you always need to reach out to the PI, and even though you are not servicing them, opportunity comes up. That a lot of time, I mean, we open a store, and but there are many people doesn't know what you sell on the store.
Okay.
The research facilitator comes into play. That the more you reach out, and the better it is. And end of the day, and it's a win-win situation for both. And that's the reason someone asked, do you get mad when your research facilitator asks a question? No, actually, we make a transition from research facilitator to system engineers. And there are people doing that. Our work study students, that's what they did. Now they're the engineer for us within our group.
It is right at time, 4:30. Henry, do we have a couple more minutes?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So what kind of tools or relationships do you have to get facilitators at the grant proposal stage? We often face issues with clients asking for assistance they didn't budget for. So are you asking for, they need extra help with their software from a third party?
I can clarify if you want.
Sure.
So I'm from the College of Engineering at the University of Illinois, and we come into the picture well after the fact. They've already wrote their proposal, submitted their proposal, gotten the money, and then they're like, oh yeah, we have this research project that we need technology for. And they're like, okay, that's great. Let's talk about what you need. And we go through the whole needs assessment. And then they're like, oh, well, we only budgeted for like $500 for IT support. So we can't really like afford really much of anything. So I'm trying to tackle getting involved earlier and getting involved at the grant proposal writing. So if you have any like tips, tricks, tools, or relationships that you have, and I'm building some of the those relationships with like the sponsored programs offices and stuff like that. But I'm just wondering if there's any other tactics that other people use to get in earlier.
We have a number of ways that we do is that whenever someone submits a grant proposal, there's a checkbox on a web form when they upload it to, I believe it's out of our VPR office. And whenever they upload the proposal, they have to check that they've contacted us or we get a copy of it. So that's one little way. The next one is probably, we have long-term relationships with a lot of research groups, not all of them, but the bigger ones. So a number of research groups, they'll ask us for our feedback to start with. And that's pretty effective whenever, you know, they trust you enough to ask you first, how much do we need, you know, what do we need to budget for to get this, you know, software to run in your supercomputer. And other than that, you'll probably miss some, and it's better to get a good plan and plan on, you know, some expansion. And you know, sometimes there'll be projects show up that you haven't budgeted for, and you can, you know, kindly help them out. I think that will ingratiate you a lot with the people that they talk to. So if someone has a grant, they didn't put in enough money in the project to be able to afford the IT support. If you take that on for a while, you can make them as really good. It can generate goodwill within the community. I think that's what I'm trying to say.
All right. And I don't, thank you for that. I appreciate that information. And just as a follow-up, but you don't have to go into too much detail. I'm just kind of curious. Does anybody at their university do like a faculty orientation for like prospective or new faculty on campus?
I don't know if Henry does or not. I don't think that he does.
That's just one of the things that we spitballed to try to tackle this particular issue.
Yeah. No, that's a good question. We do tours a lot, and so I don't think that we have a standard HPC onboarding, you know, intake, or we have tours quite a bit during the year, like several dozen times that we do tours over the year. And because of COVID, we haven't done those, but usually we do them quite often. And so anyone can join. It doesn't matter. The more the merrier.
So we don't have an onboarding specifically for, you know, PI faculty type people, but we do have once a year, there is a research fair where basically there's all sorts of research resources, and, you know, it's when they give out their awards for people for the, you know, university wide, that type of thing. And we set up a table there, and almost every year there's somebody's like, oh, I didn't know this existed. This might help me. And we've made a lot of connections that way.
That's exactly the same thing that we plan for it. And so when new faculty comes in, usually they have the HR training, and that training, they come to find out all kinds of services. So I think the university also added that, hey, we have Office of Research, and they have, this is the IT resources, and they give the pamphlet, and there they find the general information. The HPC team is there, but it is in the roadmap to, when you onboard them, to have them contact us to the Office of Research, and even they're trying to do certain amount of money dedicated for the HPC.
So there's also a question here about, is there any standard training focused on empathy inclusion for assisted men onboarding process? Does anyone on the panel have any kind of training about having more empathy for us? We should have some.
I would be assuming there's standardized training period. I think
Yeah.
that's kind of the,
Yeah.
we're talking on the chat there.
And one more, how do you handle running systems beyond the warranty? Researchers often think they bought something for 5 years ago and it still should be running. We run our systems for 8 years. And so that's not an issue right now, but most of the time, by the time that 8 years has passed, and it's well past time to upgrade. And they'll be so happy about the speed up that would be something really good for them.
Our policy's generally been, once it's after 5 years old, we tell them that we're going to put minimal effort into it.
Yeah.
If it's something we can jump in and, we can fix fairly easily, we'll do that. But we're not going to make that a priority. And if it breaks, it breaks. Just like if you bought it from if you bought it and had it sitting in your lab, what are you going to do with it? You're going to have somebody come fix it.
Yeah.
We will if we can, but we're not going to make it a priority.
Okay.
I think administration we learned a lesson. We didn't know the system was running over 5 years. All of a sudden they said, well, you didn't notify. That's your fault. You're the IT guys. I'm a researcher. You need to buy the disk. So we ended up buying the disk for them because it failed. So now we give them notice. They have that ahead of time that your system is getting expired. And like Carl says, it's going to be on the good faith. We'll do our best, the best effort, but we cannot guarantee you your data and research. So either you upgrade it or some system cannot even be upgraded. The vendor doesn't want it to support it anymore. So
we have even gone past that on ours now, and this is a fairly new policy within the last 2 or 3 years, that when you buy a new machine, that we only use the condo model on it for the 5 years too. After that, it becomes general usage. You no longer have priority access on it either.
oh really?
So yeah, well, I mean, and it solves that problem. It's like, well, once you're past that 5 year mark, you've got your good out of it. You can still use it, but as a general pool, you don't have the priority access.
I think the biggest thing is making sure that their data is still, okay and accessible. And I think for me, Ceph has been a really great project that we got into a couple of years ago, because it disconnects the hardware from the actual files. And that way, as we update our systems or put new drives or whatever in Ceph, we don't have to worry about it. And the same thing goes with tape. I mean, we've got a large tape archive and people can store their files on there. And even if, they don't have the money to refresh their computational resource, that they still have their data available, and, wherever they can run it, they can. Let's see if there was any other questions. Do we have any?
There's one that we had that was on our list.
Go ahead.
That I would like to mention. Can a research computing facilitator learn or do to make life for their systems professionals easier? And my answer is basic troubleshooting, understanding how to bisect problems and being able to generate a minimum test case. We ran into a case where we had a chemistry code that was failing on write, where it was failing, and it turns out that there was a limit in the Linux kernel that did not allow write commands to send more than 2 gigabytes of data in a single chunk. And so our research facilitator was able to take this enormous chemistry program and take it down to a 5-line C program that was able to replicate that problem, and we're able to work with the vendor to solve it. So being able to take these kind of like complex problems and bring them down to the point where we can take them to vendors and yell at them for it being horribly broken is really so those kind of skills are really valuable.
Okay. Do you use some standard or some detailed templates to collect user requirements for designing, provisioning appropriate systems? I don't think we have any templates here at OU, but maybe everyone else can weigh in. No, it's usually a bunch of questions, one after the other, until we can see the full picture, but usually we don't have any like standard templates to.
But we see such a very group of people coming in to use our resources. You have some people that have been using research computing for years and years and years, and they know exactly what they need, and they know what the system requirements they need and all that kind of thing. And then you have somebody that's like, I don't know, I want to do some AI stuff.
Yeah. And it's hard to
Yeah, the
project
balance
that.
between
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah the balance between the effort required to build those intake forms and then keep them up to date and in sync with what we need versus is often more than what they would save for some of these cases. But it is good to consider, like, these are the things that come up all the time. Make the really obvious, ask the really obvious questions, because they may be obvious to the systems team. They're not necessarily obvious to the researcher.
Has anyone ever lost user data? It might be a story from the trenches, but curious. Yes, I would figure everyone has, and it's never fun, ever.
Yep.
Yeah.
We have users that lose their own data and we don't have backups.
Yeah.
That's a fairly frequent thing. Hey, can you restore from backup? We don't have one of those.
Yeah. Yeah, we do our best not to have any more of those stories, but I think that's just part of having a computer, and you have to expect, we always have backups. That's our thing, and backups are cheap. Dana has a good story. Let me tell you my array of user data loss stories that involve fire sometime. Do you want to tell it now?
Sure. I was just starting to type, but there was a tenure track professor in year 4.5 who had all of their research on one computer. They thought that computer was being backed up. Not only was it not being backed up, they discovered that it wasn't being backed up at the point at which the primary computer had actually caught fire and the grad student was hosing it down with a fire extinguisher. And that's how they discovered that the backups did not exist and were not working.
No.
And then I have another friend who personally salvaged $300,000 worth of data by having discovered the external copy of like 4-month out of date data sitting on a hard drive that had been sitting on top of the fireplace.
No.
Yeah.
He has some good stories. So when I remember my folder in Scratch Tree was gone, I panicked because I have tons of data there. When I checked it the following day, Scratch Tree was back. Yeah.
We had to rebuild a bunch of user data on Ceph. The file CephFS broke, and we had to reassemble from with manual processes getting people's data back. So I don't think we actually lost anything that wasn't.
CERN did that. Yeah, CERN did that. They had a bug that they had hit in Ceph, and it was I saw a YouTube video, and the guy went through a 45-minute talk about how they resurrected a multi-petabyte file system by hand to be able to recover user data because of a bug in Ceph. And
yeah, we have one of those too. We have an email from Sage Weil, who's the creator of Ceph, saying, yes. Hey, you found a bug.
Yes.
And your stuff's all broke. So yeah, my other sysadmin actually went through and wrote programs to recover stuff by hand. And we didn't get everything back for about 2 months, but like I said, anything that was over a day old at that point, I think we got.
Never live in your shoes. Yeah. Okay. Looks like people are wanting to wrap it up. So thanks everyone for joining in the panel. It was really good, really informative.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Let me shut off the recording.